You are beautiful, my sweet, sweet song. You are beautiful, my sweet, sweet song. You are beautiful, my sweet, sweet song. I will sing again.
Good morning, Forward Point. How's everyone doing? Woo! Woo! Good morning, good morning. My name is Sonia, and I am joined with Miss Casey. And we want to give you all a warm welcome this morning. Here at Forward Point, we are a community of faith, hope, and love, helping people find their because we believe you were created on and we want to be part of that story any way we can. All right, Miss Casey, if you're new here, what can you expect?
Oh my God, that's a lot.
I know.
Do we have time for that? I mean, it's so much love and acceptance here, no judgment. It's kind of like Planet Fitness, no judgment.
Right.
You know? If you're new here, and I am up at the front of the building there at the welcome desk, you can come see me. We do have bags for you. We have a little gift for you, some banana bread. So please, if you're new, definitely come see me. Also, you can follow us on social media here. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but the most important way and the most successful way to get in touch with us is through our Church Center app, which is right at your local app store.
Yes. You can also text welcome to 315-883-2213. We'd like to send you another small gift in the mail. And with that, we like to have a lot of fun around here at Forward Point. It's not your typical Sunday, so we're going to play another game called Boomer Say What. So we're going to go back into history and see if we can figure out boomer slang, all right? So if you're old, you can't participate, or if you remember what you used to say, all right? So can you speak boomer? Try your hand at interpreting these popular sayings from the baby boomers' teen years, the 60s. That's a long time ago. So let's see our first one, see if we all remember. Word from the bird.
Come on, you guys.
Come on.
Come on.
What was it?
Well, what was that? Bird is the word.
What does it mean?
Thank you. It's a song.
No, you're not even right.
What?
I don't think you're right.
Bird, 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 bird is
Well,
the word.
that's a song, but I don't think it's from the boomers.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right. So let's see. Meaning, to be honest, being work. So that was not, you guys didn't even get it right.
Wait a minute. I don't know where you got that definition from.
Huh?
Where'd you get the definition from?
I don't know. Talk to Jimmy on that one. Anyways, all right. Now, don't flip your wig. All right. I think I heard it out there. Calm down. Yes.
I guess I'm not a boomer.
I don't think so. No. Come on, Snake. Let's rattle. How corny. Goodness. All right. Anyone? Let's go. Like, let's fight, right? Let's dance, let's fight.
Let's fight?
Oh, I don't think I heard both, so no bonus points on that one. You foul. All right, next one. Huh? No, I failed on that one, so, you know. All right, what's your bag? What's your problem? Yes.
What was it?
What's your problem? Good job, Chaz. All right, stop dipping in my Kool-Aid.
I've never heard of any.
Chaz Ray got it? Let's see. Stop being nosy, leave me alone. Good job, Chazzy.
And how old is Chaz? And she knew that.
Yes. She might have heard that a time or two. So thank you for having some fun with us. And as we talked about the Church Center app, that highlights all of our events. And our men had their breakfast yesterday morning over at Love Handles. Woo! I have to say, I walked in there at around 11:30, and I was hungry because all of the smells were still there at Love Handles. Even though they mopped and stuff, you can't get that smell out of there. So I was hungry. Thanks for not leaving me a plate. I appreciate it. Anyways, this coming weekend, though, for this month only, the women do have their women's breakfast, and we are going to have that up at the Skinner's Camp. So do look in the women's breakfast for carpooling, all of that kind of stuff in the Church Center app. Get connected with that. And as we go into this week, we do have a small video.
It's couches and porches and kitchen tables. It's stories shared and moments worth remembering. It's hoping and praying and taking chances. It's jokes and laughter and shoulders to cry on. It's questions and answers and I don't knows. It's knowing you don't have to figure it all out by yourself. It's messy and imperfect. It's giving and serving and growing better together. It's life, and we weren't meant to do it alone. Life is better together. Find a life group that's right for you today.
Sonia, I have to say that I am so excited about life groups.
Yes.
Life groups just keeps me grounded during the week, and
Yes.
when it's not here, I feel like I've lost something. So I'm
Right.
really psyched. This come next week, right?
Next week, they're going to start. So today, right after service, if you're like, what is life group? What are these crazy people talking about? Right after service, you, as you walked in today, you may have noticed some tables out in the lobby. We're going to have some treats out there and all of our different life group leaders that you can meet, talk to, sign up, find out what times they are. As you have heard us say here, we believe that life happens in circles, not in rows. And the video said it better than I can. You truly, for the next, 10 months, will be doing life with these people. You're going to be at their highs and lows, their valleys, their peaks, and it's just so rewarding, so amazing to walk through life with a group of people that learn to understand you, get to know you, you talk about the message over the week. So get plugged in, stop and say hi to someone. I promise it's just a one and done thing. If the first group doesn't work, try another one.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is to just keep
Yes.
on keeping on, trying.
And if you want more information, again, text Life Group to 315-883-2213. And with that, we're going to kick out the children. You can all go up with Cherry and Glenn and Kylie are back there. All right, and then we're going to continue with our message.
Good morning, Ford Point. How's everybody doing today? Yes, it's so great to see everyone and to be back together. We're welcome if you're online joining us or if you're here in person. Thank you so much for being a part of our weekly gathering here at Ford Point. It's kind of a fun week because it's really, although it's the second week of September, it really is kind of the launch of this new season. Last week was Labor Day weekend. There were still some people probably on vacation. So it's kind of one of those, anticipation weekends last weekend as we kick things off with this community series. But today's really like the first day where probably everyone's back. There was some transition this last week. We had some people go to school. Anybody go to school this last week and start school? Not the boomers who got all those things, right? But I have 4 students and I have a principal in my house. So school is kind of a big thing this last week. Also this last week, the fair ended. Anybody get out to the fair this year? A couple people wooing. I personally don't like the fair. I think it's a big mess trying to get to the fair, and then it's a big mess trying to get out of the fair. And then you get there and everything's really expensive, and it's either raining on you or it's really hot, like there's no this nice cool temperature. So I just assume stay in my room or my house and read, play on one of my devices or something, go for a joyride on the highway with the windows down and the sunroof open. But I do not like the fair. And as a result of that, my kids have no idea what the fair is, right? They've never been. I think we took Justice when she was a lot younger, but none of the other kids have gone to the fair except for this year. what happened was kind of randomly, unexpected. I get a phone call, and it was the Stumps. It was Scott. And he said, hey, we are going to go to the fair, and we have a car that seats 4 people, so we can take 2. Don't know who, you choose, but we'll take 2 of your kids to the fair, right? And immediately I start thinking, I'm like, all right, this could be fun. I'm going to stick them in a circle, and whichever 2 come out alive, those are going to be the 2 that get to go to the fair, right? We're going to cut down on our grocery bill as well as get to choose who goes to the fair at the same time. This is going to work out perfectly. But they were kind enough, Scott and Eileen, to take some pictures and send them to me of themselves there at the fair. I had no idea that they had some reptilian heritage, but I guess that little ancestry DNA action there. They took Augustine and Chazare. We gave them 2 kids and came back with 1 kid and a cheetah. So we've had to change the diet around the house there, but it was a lot of fun. It was great seeing the pictures. However, the 2 pictures I showed you of all the ones that they sent me were probably the best. They also sent me these pictures there at the fair. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a picture snob. So whenever I get a picture that's all blurry and out of focus, I'm like, they do not have an iPhone. And sure enough, they don't have an iPhone. It gets worse from here, folks. It gets worse from here, right? I think a boomer took this picture. I don't know what's going on there, but super, super grateful for Scott and Eileen for taking 2 of our kiddos to the fair there. We had lots of fun, a little quieter there at the house because Justice Joy was at a sleepover, so we just had Litley, and we're like, Litley, go see Grandma and Grandpa, right? And Mom and Dad got the night out to ourselves. If you're joining us for the first time, we kicked off things last week in this series called Community, How We Grow Together in God's Love. And we talked about this idea that you cannot grow in your love for God without other people. This is really going to be the foundation for the entire month of September, is this idea that Forward Point, you cannot grow in your love for God without other people. You can grow in your smarts. You can grow in your, Bible memorization. You can grow in your systematic theology of all the different do's and don'ts. And that stuff is good. But you can't grow in your love for God without the other people that are here in this room, without other people. It's really the difference of Forward Point choosing to say, we're going to be an organism versus just being an organization, right? We have an org chart with all these titles and responsibilities, and this is where you fall, and this is who teaches what, right? We talked about not wanting to be a social club. The last thing we want to be is a social club, but we also don't want to come across as a battleship here in Eastwood and here in Syracuse that's just trying to blow up whoever we can for the sake of them following Jesus. We want to have this cruise ship mentality that says, we're going to do whatever we can to love on people, to make them feel like we had planned for them, we expected them to be here from week to week, that, you're so important, I decided to memorize your name, so the next time that I see you, I'm going to be able to call you by name, and I'm going to be able to give you a big high five. And we want you feeling like you came as a stranger, but left feeling as part of the family. Because if you've been here at Forward Point for any length of time, that's a lot of times what Forward Point is described as, right? It's like, man, this is my family. This is a place where I go and people know my name. And they know everything about me, and somehow they still accept me. And that's what we want everybody to feel. So last week we really dove into this idea of what does it look like for this weekly gathering that we have Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. Maybe in the future it winds up being, multiple. Maybe there's a Saturday night, who knows? But this idea that there's a weekly gathering, a time where everybody gets together under one roof, where we can encourage each other, where we can worship God together. And sometimes, just because it doesn't flat out say it in a verse, we don't realize when we look at Jesus' life, Jesus lived out a life that demonstrated, that reinforced this precedent of regular group gatherings, regular large group gatherings. We looked at Luke right after coming out of the 40 days of temptation. Jesus, first thing he did is he went home to Nazareth, where he brought up, and it was on the Sabbath day. He went into the synagogue, as was his custom. This is the guy who probably could teach all the synagogues. This is the guy who has got it all memorized. It's his very DNA, the fabric of his life, everything that they're talking about. But he chose to submit himself to this custom as an example for us to be a part of this time together. And it would be so much easier if Jesus had just said, you know what, thou shalt go to church every Sunday, right? Then there would be no confusion about it. It'd be a lot easier about it. Then I could wag my finger at those of you who missed a Sunday or 2 Sundays or 3 Sundays. But the reality is going to a weekly gathering, being part of a fellowship like this has nothing to do with your salvation. Your salvation, forward point, is as simple as this. When you recognize that you are a sinner, that you've missed the mark, and when you say, Jesus, I need you to forgive me of my sins, and I trust in you for that, that is the moment of salvation. We're not talking about salvation, but if you want to grow in your love for God, you need the people around you. And I see so many stories. I talk to so many people, and they're like, man, you know, this faith thing, it's not really working out for me. Yeah, I don't really feel anything anymore. I mean, there's that one Sunday, and I was crying, and it felt like I was there, but I didn't really do much after that, and now it's like, you know, nothing's happening. And I say, look at, you know, your life. The salvation thing you did, that's awesome. That's the most important decision you're ever going to make. But if you want to grow in your love for God, it requires you to then step out and make this weekly gathering a commitment, to make what we're going to talk about today a commitment in your life. It's not a you have to, but what we see Jesus live out is there's this opportunity, there's this, you get to be a part of something bigger than just yourself when you choose to be committed to a community. Then you begin to grow in your love for God together. And that's why we need each other. And that's what we're going to do. So I got a question for you. How many of you this morning who were here last week came expectant today? How many of you came expected to meet somebody new, right? The lights are off, so I can't really see, but I hope out there's nobody sitting by themselves, because some other people said, you know what, I'm expecting to make a friend this morning. I'm expecting to meet somebody new. Who came this morning expecting to have some fun? Right? That's one of our expectations. We're going to have some fun. If you don't come here at 9:30, we get together and we pray as a group, and then afterwards we all huddle up, and there's some shouting that's going on, and it looks like the Syracuse home game huddle with Dino Barber's going on there, right? That's what we do because we're expecting to have some fun. So we play funny little games because we're expecting to have fun. It's all right to pick on the boomers, right? Because we expect to have a little fun. How many of you came this morning expecting, man, God to do something in your heart and in your life this morning? Because I'll tell you, forward point, that happening relies a whole lot more upon you and how your heart came this morning than what happens up here on the stage. Right? It's less about if the band all hits the right chords. It's less about, Jimmy's message all having 3 points that all start with the same letter and sound the same, right? It's less about all that. That stuff's cute, and, we appreciate that. But the reality is, the expectation, it's more about how you came this morning, what your heart is looking for. Because what your heart is looking for this morning is what you're going to find and what you're going to get. And as a body, we're going to spur one another on, right? Remember that from last week? This idea that spurring, it's uncomfortable and kind of hurts a little bit. But that's the role that we're called to in each other's life, is to spur one another on, to use our boots and kind of jab us sometimes to get us going. To get us going maybe a little faster. To maybe be doing something that we know we should do, but we're not. So if you think this morning that, committing yourself to this large group once a week is tough, man, then, we're going to dive in even a little deeper this morning. And I'm going to ask you to up your commitment. If your heart's desire is to grow in God's love, then there's an invitation, there's a challenge, there's going to be a spur this morning that says it's time to go a little deeper. And what we see in Jesus' life is he models this, right? He's in the wilderness and he comes out and he goes into the synagogue, as was his custom there in chapter 4. In chapter 5, the next thing that we see Jesus do is Jesus begins to call his disciples. He begins to gather his team. In reality, Jesus was the first life group leader. He's got this small group of probably mostly teenagers. So not only was he the first life group leader, probably also the first youth pastor working with this group of young boys. And he's pulling them together and he's challenging them. He's like, yeah, fishing, that's cool, but let me show you how to become fishers of men. Yeah, lay down your nets, lay down your livelihood. Like, forget everything that you have known and enter into this way of living where we're just going to, for the next series of forever, do life together. And that's what he does, right? If you want to pursue and grow in God's love this morning, 4 point, then it's not with more large group gatherings. Being committed to that is important. But there's a shift that begins to happen where now we begin to pursue even deeper relationship with people. It's not, learning more verses. It's not having more degrees, but it's, in fact, diving into deeper relationships with the people around. It's by going deeper in relationship. If you're taking notes, I summed it up this way. Growing together in God's love happens by growing deeper in relationship, not research. I've had conversations with people who you decide, Jimmy, it's, we're going to move on from Forward Point. I'm just looking for something deeper. I'm looking for more, meat and potatoes. And 4 point, here we are in 2023, and the reality is you can go online, you can go to YouTube, you can do all sorts of research and have access to the greatest theological minds that the world has to offer. But what you can't do online is you can't grow in relationship with other people. You can't go deeper with the person on the screen. So I encourage you to go and to get all sorts of deep on the internet, not too deep though, because we don't want to have to, dig you out of some kind of weird thinking. Go do that. Go learn about all the messages behind, the way the Bible was written in certain places. But if your life is not demonstrating the desire to follow Jesus into deeper relationship, then there's a good chance that your life is not growing in God's love. Because that's what we see Jesus do, is to move from the synagogue to now this small group of boys. Right, he hits up the synagogue and he's calling his disciples and he goes on and pulls this ragtag group together and just does life with them for the rest of his life. So we're choosing here at 4 point to say, we are going to do life together. And what we want to do is we want to dive into what is probably one of the most famous life group gatherings that we see in the Bible. And what we have here, it's the end of Passion Week, and Jesus is going to be having his last meal with this life group that he has. And what we have in the book of John is this description of how the life group goes. Man, these guys are probably on a high. Just a few days prior, they walked into town and everyone was waving palm branches and everyone was shouting Hosanna, and they're feeling like they're on top of the world. Nothing can touch them. And in fact, as they're getting ready to find a place, Jesus says, all right, go into the city and you're just going to talk to this dude and you're just going to say, hey, my master needs a place to celebrate the Passover. And they're just going to give you the keys. They're going to know what you're talking about. They're going to give you the keys, and then we're going to have a place to celebrate Passover. And they're probably thinking, man, Jesus does it again. And they go and they're having this meal together, this Passover meal, something that as a good Jewish person they've done year after year after year, so much so that they could probably do it in their sleep, probably become not much more than just a ritual that they have gone through. Right, in and of itself, it was this cultural tradition that was initiated by God as a result of them being set free in Egypt. God wanted them to go through and experience this meal together to celebrate what God had did, but even more so than what God had did in setting them free, what God was still going to do. His promise that this setting free from Egypt was just a taste of the freedom that he was going to bring for the rest of the world. So they initiated this Passover meal that they would have every year. And each part of the Passover meal had a specific meaning. They would have bread, and they would have wine, and they would have herbs and bitter and all sorts of things to kind of help bring them back to what it was like living through that time. But as is the case with a lot of traditions, a lot of rituals, it had become just more of a song and dance than actually bringing them back and helping to form who they were becoming as followers of God. Or it was more like, look at what we do. Well, we go through and we are able to go through every part of this to the T, and we're so good at the Passover meal. It became less about what God had done, less about what God was going to do, and it became more about what we are going to do. Because Forward Point, you can go through all the right motions, all the right song and dances, you can say all the right words, and still be nowhere near or closer to the heart of God. To have not grown in relationship with him. Maybe you've probably done your research, but the question is, are you in deeper relationship with him? And if it doesn't involve the other people in this room, then there should be a red flag. So as we look at this life group in John chapter 13, it could have been the start of this reaffirming process where Jesus kind of goes through the motions and he says, you know what? Keep on doing this. This is what the most important thing about life is to have this meal once a year with all these different elements. But he doesn't. In fact, what he does in the middle of the meal here in John chapter 13, it says, so he got up from the supper table, set aside his robe, and put on an apron. And then he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash the feet of the disciples, drying them with his apron. All right, it's almost as if Jesus kind of reads the room. He's there, and they're having this meal, and they're probably mindlessly going through all the different steps and eating the different pieces of the meal. And he recognizes, you know what, they got all this information up here, all the process up here, but everything we've done over the past 3 years has not gone from here to here. And in the middle of the meal, probably a big cultural no-no, he gets up. And he doesn't just get up and, go to the other room, or he just starts taking off his clothes. I would imagine this probably is going to, jar some attention with the people at hand. He recognizes, you know what, in a few hours, things are about to go down around here. And the reality is, if the disciples continue down this path, where it's nothing more than just a ritual, nothing more than just a tradition, then they're not going to make it past what's going to happen in a few hours. And what I have to do in the middle of this life group is I got to challenge some thinking. I got to challenge some of the process, some of the why behind what they're doing. Yeah, they're great at going through the script. And once it starts, it probably just kind of can go on autoplay. But he just gets up and he starts taking off his clothes. And he starts washing their feet. And when he got to Simon Peter, Peter said, Master, you wash my feet? And Jesus answered, you don't understand. Peter, we've been doing this life thing together for 3 years. Peter, you are the leader of this group. And there's about to be something that goes down, and if you haven't gotten it by now, we have got to try some drastic measures. I don't know about you, when we tend to talk and communicate with someone who doesn't understand, I don't know, how do you do it? Most of the time what we try to do is we just repeat ourselves, right? The same exact thing. You do it this way. And then if they still don't get it, right, maybe you raise your voice. You do it this way, right? Thinking that somehow that, doesn't make them feel stupid and helps with the process, right? Anybody ever done that before? Yeah. And Jesus recognizes, I can't just repeat myself. I can't just repeat myself louder. I got to do something here that is going to drop some jaws. I got to do something here that really challenges their worldview and why they're here. Because here's the reality, Peter, you don't understand. After all the things that you've seen and all the things that we've done together, you still have this top-down hierarchy belief that I'm just going to come in and I'm going to, bust out lightning bolts from my eyes and liberate all of you from the Roman people, and we're going to then subdue the world through force. And that's not what the kingdom of God is like, Peter. You don't understand. You don't understand now what I'm doing. Yeah, you're kind of taken aback by it, but you don't understand. It's going to be clear enough to you later. Like you're going to get it in a little bit. It's going to be like a joke, a dad joke that goes over your head and comes back a little bit later, right? Like that's what's going to happen. Peter persisted, but you're not going to wash my feet ever. Right? He's starting to get a little indignant. Starting to get like, this does not jive with my worldview. This does not compute with what I believe is supposed to happen, with why we're doing it. It's not about God's kingdom coming and living through us. It's about us taking over and establishing God's kingdom. And Jesus is shaking things up. Jesus said, Peter, if I don't wash you, then you can't be part of what I'm doing. And Peter's a young man who's left everything to follow Jesus, and to probably hear those words, any kind of hint of not being able to be a part of what Jesus was doing, I'm sure was very jarring. In addition to Jesus derobing and Jesus taking on the task of the servants and washing feet, it's just this jarring moment after jarring moment where Peter's worldview is being rattled to the core, and it happens in the context of this life group. This small group of people who are committed to each other. You see, Jesus is saying we've got to turn this upside down. Because the way that it's operating now, where everyone is out for themselves and we're just out to take over, that's not what the kingdom of God is like. I'm not ashamed, Jesus says, to do what the servants do. And my church is going to be built on people who also are not ashamed to do what the servants do, to not be ashamed to take the lowliest of positions, to not be ashamed to be the last ones in. Because when it comes to life groups, Forward Point, to grow together in God's love, we go expecting to give rather than to receive. Most of the things we do in our life, we do as a result of what we're going to receive, what we're going to get out of it. We go to school because we're going to get a diploma. We go to college because we're going to get a degree that we hope is going to provide for us some kind of large paycheck that's going to allow us to have the house with the picket fence and the dog and the 2.5 kids. We're expecting to receive. And that has not tainted us in our religion, in our faith walk. More often than not, what we do is we're a part of things so as we're receiving what we expect to receive. Maybe a band that's got this awesome dynamics that by the end we get the little goosebumps and the chills. Maybe it's a speaker that every week brings me to tears and makes me feel like I'm the only person in the room. We come expecting to receive. But this process of growing deeper in relationship with people forces us into a place where we're submitting to this lifestyle of not what we receive, but what we give. Because you give, you're giving, Forward Point, when you act opposite of your nature. Right? When you choose to show up rather than stay home. Man, I cannot tell you how many life groups that I'm thinking I do not want to get together today. Unfortunately, I'm the person leading it, so they all show up at my house anyways. But by the end, I'm thinking, man, that was the best night of the week. Dare I say, even better than Sunday morning in our gathering. Man, time after time, I had that same experience. So I wised up this year, and I said, you know what, we're splitting our group, and everyone in my group, you got to go to Troy and Michelle's group. Now I don't mind life group anymore. No, I'm just kidding. I love you guys. I'm going to miss you. Right? But our nature is to stay home. Yeah, it's not comfortable to be open and to be vulnerable and to have to share and to have to sit through that awkward silence, right, where Jimmy's kind of waiting for someone to answer, right? Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact. Shoot, he asked me. Right? That's uncomfortable. Our nature would be to stay home and play video games, to sleep, to binge watch something on a streaming service, right? Opposite of our nature is to come prepared to, you know what, I'm going to share. I'm going to share in some food. I'm going to help prepare a meal or a snack. I'm going to choose to share about my life, to be open, to be vulnerable. That is opposite of our nature. That is opposite of what we would do left to ourselves. And when you start tapping into those areas that this is opposite, then you know that you're coming with this spirit, with this attitude of, I'm here to give more than I am to receive. And I say more than because the reality is when you start living this way of giving, man, you receive so much. I wish I could quantify it for you, but you got to trust me when I say, when you let go of what your nature would want to do of its own and you just choose to give, then it's going to come back to you and you're going to receive. But if we're going to grow in God's love, Forward Point, then it's going to be about expecting to give rather than to receive. And this is hard. It's hard to do it once a week when you come with this gathering and, you know, but then you talk about a room in someone's house where the lights are not dark and I actually have to look at everyone else, right? Like, oh man, it's getting real now. It's getting hard to be able to do this. And that really is a description for all of following Jesus. It's this idea. G.K. Chesterton said it this way. He said, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting, right? It's not that people have done it and been committed to it, and then at the end they're like, you know what, this doesn't work. This is bananas, this is bonkers. He says it's not that at all. He says actually what it is that it's been found difficult and left untried. It's that a bunch of people, they start to press into what Jesus asks us to do, what Jesus models for us to do. And when we see that, you know what, man, going deeper in relationship with people, doing things that are opposite of my nature, that is whack, jack, and I don't want anything to do with it. That's what he's saying. And that really is the reality. That really is what could describe the church in Western civilization in 2023, is that we will take it as far as we are receiving what we expect to receive from it, to get out of it. And what we see Jesus doing here in this life group is he's blowing up this paradigm. He's washing their feet. He's challenging Peter, you're not getting it, man. It can't go on this way or it's never going to make it. And after he goes around and washes everyone's feet, Jesus gets back to his spot around the meal. You know, you guys starting to pick up what I'm putting down here, right? And they just kind of get back to the Passover meal. And there's two parts of the Passover meal that were specifically part of the Passover meal because they had experienced them probably every day of their lives. Every Jewish person, probably part of their meal, had bread and had wine as a part of their meals, at least for dinner, right? It's something that's true to our culture. How many times do you go out to a restaurant and what's the first thing they do? They give you some bread, right? And then what do? Would you like something to drink, right? It's part of our DNA is this bread and wine, drink kind of fixation. But he takes these two elements, the bread, that in the Passover meal, it had to be bread that was unleavened, right? It didn't rise, so it was probably some kind of what we would have matzah crackers, probably more like that, flat, almost like a chip that you would snap and break. And you would have the wine. These two elements that were part of the Passover meal, but more importantly, were part of their everyday life, what they did every day. And it's interesting because John, in his telling in the gospel, man, he gives us the most detail about this life group meeting that's going on. All the things that were said and the prayers that Jesus offers and some of the things that the disciples say. But it doesn't tell us anything about the time of taking the bread and taking the wine and saying, do this in remembrance of me. But if you read the other three gospels, all three of them don't really go into detail, but they all have the part where Jesus takes the bread and he breaks it and he gives it to them and says, this is my body. Whenever you do this in remembrance of me. And this is the cup filled with my blood, poured out for you. Whenever you drink of this cup, do this in remembrance of me. And when he's doing this, I find it interesting that Jesus didn't do this and say, you know, when you leave from here, make sure you do this once a week. When you do this, make sure you find a group of people and you all commit to doing this once a month, or you commit to doing this even every day. Like, it was less about the ritual and the consistency and more about the process that Jesus was putting them through. Right? He's not setting up some kind of new rule to follow, because remember, it has nothing to do about salvation. If it had something to do with salvation, then he would say, thou shalt make sure on the first Sunday of every month that you have golden, things with a cross on top, and you pass it around in rows, and make sure you do it at the very least once a quarter. He didn't, because it's not about salvation. But there is something forming in our lives about going through this process. He's saying, but whenever you eat bread, whenever you drink wine, remember me. And for them, that was probably at the very least a daily, if not multiple times a day, occurrence. Is to go through this process, this life group process of going deeper in a relationship with people on the regular. When you think about it that way, man, all of a sudden, doing communion, once a month, once a week, it's not even enough, right? But what have we done here in our culture? Our culture is great at commercializing things, right? What's the whole point of a commercial? You're watching a show and you see a commercial and it's all about how you can do something that you have in your life, how you do it better, quicker, cheaper, faster, right? All of these things. And probably you have one of these things, right? I think you got one handed out to you, right? This is the very epitome of commercialization, right? Where we would get to a place where we would say, hey, let's sell this cup full of juice, and we're gonna seal it with a piece of cracker on top, and we're gonna make it super easy for people to take communion, because that's what it's about. Getting a little piece of cracker in your mouth, and then getting a little 0.2 ounce of juice in your body. But I would imagine, as Lee was passing these out, what's the first thing that came to your mind when he gave you one of these? Oh, we're taking communion today, right? Oh, we're doing communion. Right? That somehow, whatever the bread looks like, whatever the juice looks like, that just by going through these two motions, we've somehow entered into what Jesus is doing in this life group. And for far too long, I feel like we've sold ourselves short when it comes to communion, when it comes to entering into the story. I mean, and just like potentially the Jews had, kind of gotten away from the heart of the Passover meal, to remind them everything that they had come out of, and to remind them and point them towards everything that they were going to do, so too we maybe have come a little bit, or maybe a lot bit, away from what this is really all about what God did and what God is going to do. That maybe too we have drifted. It's interesting when you look up communion in the dictionary or Google it like I did. The second definition is probably all one that we thought of when this was given to us this morning. The service of Christian worship at which bread and wine are consecrated and shared, right? And you can probably think through all your different experiences where that kind of sums it up. Maybe as a good, Catholic person, you had your first communion and it was a super special occasion, or maybe even part of a Protestant tradition your whole life, and they did it different ways. You came forward and you took a bread and you dipped it, or maybe you passed around the golden plates, like I remember for most of my life. But this process, right? But I started thinking, and it really is what led me to kind of look, what is the definition of communion? And the first definition of communion is this: the sharing or exchanging of intimate thoughts and feelings, especially when the exchange is on a mental or spiritual level. And I'll be honest, man, in my office, I'm reading that, and my jaw just dropped, because I'm looking at these two, and I'm thinking, man, of these two, which one of these definitions is focused on who we're becoming as followers of Christ? Which of these two definitions draws us into the story about deeper relationship with the people around us? Man, taking a piece of bread, putting some juice in a cup, and ingesting that does not do anything to draw you into the story of Jesus. But what does draw you into the story of Jesus is when you take communion as the idea of, whenever I do things that I do every day, like eating bread and drinking wine, I'm going to share, I'm going to exchange intimate thoughts and feelings with people about my mental and spiritual life. When I look at this life group that Jesus had on this night before his betrayal, man, I don't think about consecrated bread and wine. I see Jesus exchanging some deep things, man, so deep, Peter, you don't even understand what's going on. This is how deep it is, my man. But I'm going to give you a taste, because afterwards it's going to start to make sense about the exchange of these spiritual principles. And I think about my life, and I begin to orient my first life group. My first life group is my family. I begin to orient my first life group and our practices around this. For many years I kind of was a little anti, the whole praying before meals. I just felt like I hated going through ritualistic type prayers where we're just praying because we're supposed to before meals. But over this last summer, what we've gotten really good at as a family, no matter what anybody's doing, I could be in the office working, they could be on their devices or watching TV or whatever, but when dinner is ready, we got to get together to pray, because I don't know how this is going to treat. No, I'm just kidding. I love my wife's cooking. But what we've began to do is we shut off all the things, and we get around the table, and we just start exchanging intimate thoughts and feelings about our day, the things that we went through, the highs, the lows. Man, it was a challenge, right? You don't just start off day one at being like, what's your deepest, darkest fear, right? But as you begin to put this into practice and you begin to kind of stir the waters a little bit, the first week it may be a little superficial. The next week, though, gets a little deeper. And now every time we're breaking bread together as my first family, is we're choosing to not just settle, but to really exchange intimate thoughts about life and spirituality. And my second life group, we as long as we've been leading a life group, we said, we want to make sure that we always have a meal. We feel like there's something special about getting together and being able to eat with our friends. And it turns out, man, like there's an example with Jesus and his life group. They were getting together for a meal, and he's dropping truth bombs, and he's challenging them. And like, Peter, you keep this up, and you're not going to be able to be part of the group. Got pretty real. And what we've experienced with our second life group of this practice of, again, breaking bread. And the first one and the second one, they kind of superficial, and we don't get too deep. But man, after a couple weeks, after a couple months, there's people crying, there's people sharing deep hurts and pains and realities. Everything that is counter to your nature to want to experience. But it's a group of people who said, I'm going to choose to go with the idea to give rather than to receive. And to grow in my love for God by going deeper with this group of people, with this life group. And it doesn't have to be a meal. Other groups have snacks and different things. But there's something about consecrating this time of breaking a granola bar, a snack, of something together with the intention of exchanging life, spiritual principles. How this affects me, how this affects us together. Because Forward Point, this morning, the invitation is to not just take communion, but to participate in communion. Right? I would encourage you to not take this and open it and go through the motions, but to take this and put it on something you're going to see every day. To remind yourself to not just go through the motions. There are some people who, for them, going through the process of eating bread and taking the juice is super meaningful and spiritual. Man, I remember being asked by Mama Skinner if I would come over and do communion with them not long before Papa Skinner passed away. And man, I had to go there and think, how in the world do I bring anything to these heroes of mine in the faith? And the reality is I didn't. They started sharing verses, and then they start crying, and I'm starting to cry. And for us, it was this super exchange of some very deep spiritual things. So for me, when I put this on my mantle and on my desk, I look at it and I think, man, is my life reflective of this commercialism? Or am I going to live and strive for that experience that I had with them in their kitchen? And for you this morning, my challenge is don't settle. Don't settle for this prepackaged faith, this prepackaged life. Allow yourself to be challenged this morning to say, I'm going to go deeper in my relationship with God by going deeper in my relationship with the people here in this room. And I'm going to get into a life group. Man, I am so grateful for the Stumps and taking our kids to the fair. But when I look at this picture and I think about Scott and I think about him taking my kids to the fair, there's a good chance that if you had asked me maybe 12 months ago, 14 months ago, I'd be like, Scott, turns out they're not feeling so well. Probably not a good idea. Like, I wouldn't have been okay with it. And for good reason. And this is a story that Scott would share about himself. If you're a guy here and have been part of any of our men's ministry, you know about his life. If you're in our life group, you know about his life. Scott came here to 4 Point simply because his wife had been coming, and he really enjoyed the difference that it was making in her life. So he's like, all right, I'll go too. And he started coming. But as we got to know Scott, and as Scott started submitting himself to this process, we got to learn about Scott that, Scott, for a long period of his life, had been wrestling with alcohol. He would tell you himself how he would go home and just kind of numb himself to life by drinking anywhere from, a liter to 2 liters a day of wine. After today, he'd probably just tell you he was having communion. But he began to recognize in himself that this process of numbing himself was not healthy. And he began to recognize this as a result of submitting himself by choosing to go to a life group. And it was through this life group process where he at one point would not say anything and no one knew anything about him, but then gradually began to share. And as he shared, he began to see in himself how this thing was holding him back from being all that God had called him to be. Whatever the reason for, whatever the trauma for, whatever caused it, it didn't matter to him anymore. He just began to be open and honest, and all the time you would hear the same story about how, man, this is my life, and at one point he even was able to walk away from alcohol. And it was for a period of months. And then on vacation, he'll tell you how he kind of allowed himself to get sucked back into it. But as he came back into his life group, and as he became re-entered into this formation process in him, he allowed his community to speak life and love into him. And again, he was able to lay down this alcohol, and now for the first time, because he wants to, not because he has to, he's let go of alcohol. And without hesitation, when he called me up on the phone, I said, you know what, Scott? Absolutely, would love for you to take the kids. Didn't have a doubt, didn't have a fear, right? And we'll talk about a lot more next week in kind of part 2 of this idea, because there's a lot that happened that Scott submitted himself to, but only by taking a step into what was opposite of everything he would want to do in his nature. But he took a risk. And he was loved. And he was accepted. He wasn't judged. He wasn't shamed or condemned. And this life group process that he gave himself over to has changed his life. Yesterday morning, he was part of 3 guys that lead now the men's ministry, and he's up speaking in front of guys, and man, it's a totally different Scott than if you'd met him when he first started coming. He still growls. We're still working on that. But the funny thing is man, if we had teased Scott 18 months ago about his growling, we never would have seen him again. But now that he's committed to this process, man, our group teases him about it every single week, I think. And now it's almost like we're saying, hey, we love you, Scott. And that's the power of a life group. And our urging this morning and our invitation this morning is that you would step out of your comfort zone. That after we respond here this morning through some worship, through singing, we're going to then leave, and we're going to ask you to respond by just checking out some of the life group people out there. Ask them some questions. What do they do with their group? And commit yourself this morning that you're going to refuse to be denied the opportunity to grow in your love for God. Because to grow in your love for God this morning, you got to be committed to a community, and you got to be committed to a life group. Because our love for God increases as we go deeper in relationship, not research. Research is good. Research is great. Please get smarter. But don't do it without the people around you. God, help us this morning to maybe go to a place in our life that we've never gone before. Help us this morning to recognize the areas in our life that maybe our faith has become commercialized and we've just settled for a little communion cup faith. And this morning you're inviting us into this process of taking the things that we do every single day and using them as springboards into the exchange of spiritual truths in our life. God, I pray that this morning would be the first step that many people take into this deeper relationship with you in a way that, man, maybe they have never experienced before in their faith because they just felt, I don't need it, I'm not about it. But this morning would be the first step in this new depth and relationship with you as they choose to commit to a life group this morning. So would you work in our hearts? Would you work in Forward Point? That as we grow deeper, that you would allow us to continue to be just a beacon of light for the people in our neighborhood and in our city. That we're just going to love on people and we're going to invite them into being deeper and deeper in relationship with us. That we're going to come expectant to our Sunday morning gatherings. We're going to come expectant to our life groups. We're going to come expectant to love handles and to our outreaches, that God is going to do something. So would you continue the work in us this morning, and would you continue over this week and into next week as we continue this idea and how you're calling us to be a community.
Here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all, surrendering all. Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near. I'm desperate for you. Desperate for you, yeah. I surrender, yeah, yeah. I surrender. Drench my soul as mercy and grace unfold. I hunger and thirst. I hunger and thirst for you. With arms stretched wide, I know you hear my cry. Speak to me now. Speak to me now. I surrender, and I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more, and I surrender. I surrender. Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a rushing wind, like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe in. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. I surrender. I surrender. Yes, I want to know you more. I want to know you more. I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. I surrender, surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. And I surrender. And I surrender. And I want to know you more. I want to know you like a rushing wind, like a rushing wind. Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. I surrender. I surrender. Oh, I want to know you more. I want to know you more.
Sing it again. People come together, strangers, neighbors, blood is one. Yes. Children, generations of every nation, the kingdom come. Don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Whoa. Jesus, our redemption, our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come. Don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Let me hear you. Whoa. Swing wide. Swing wide. All you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Let me hear you. Swing wide. Swing wide. All you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens, and let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Sing it again, swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Let me hear you, Jesus. Jesus, our redemption, redemption is in his blood. Jesus, Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, his kingdom come. Give him a shout of praise, church.
How powerful was that message, Casey? What stood out to you this morning?
So, a couple things. First, I had an instructor one time, and he told me, the days that you don't want to go are the days that you have to go because something is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember that, and even this morning, I was like, I don't even want to go.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to sleep. But I got up and I came, and it was a great message from Pastor Ginny today.
Yes.
So there's that. But the other thing I think that is more important is the fact that, as most of you know, I am a drug counselor, a substance abuse counselor. And I have meetings with people one-on-one. But the biggest part of this is the groups. They've done research to show that people move forward in the recovery by going to groups. They have others around them to support them. You know, and I think he just reminded me of that. So I think if we support each other, we're going to get so much further than where we are right now.
Absolutely. I was thinking of a few things, and I'll be brutally honest. Last week I had a woe is me kind of moment. As you know, I work over at Love Handles now, and one of my biggest fears was giving up my nights and my weekends. I've done that, worked so I could have banker's hours, as I would call them, and as we're getting into winter months, I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to work all of these nights, and Mondays I'm not going to have to myself because we have meetings, and then I have life group on Tuesdays, and when am I going to have my free time? And I was slapped across the face this morning with, I'm supposed to be with community, right? I'm supposed to be with my life group. I'm supposed to be with my family, so it's not about me. So that was a really good reminder. And I also have to point out, I don't know who did the image, but if you look at our community image, that is us. Moving into Eastwood, fixing houses with all of our community workers. Like, this is Eastwood. It's not in the coffee or the tea or the water. It's in the froyo. So I'm sorry, but yes, that's our community. Anyways, again, if you're new here to Forward Point, we just want to thank you for stepping into a new community of faith. Get connected with the Church Center app, all of those different things. And join us after service today for that life group fair.
Yes, we also have 4 different ways you can give. There's a donation box right there in the back. Right here you can see you can visit forwardpoint.org. You can text any amount to 84321 and then download the Church Center app. It's a great way to keep track of all your donations and what's going on in the church.
Yes, within the app, again, about all of our new coming up events. And we have our prayer team in the back corner. If there is anything on your heart that you feel you need prayed for, or you need to stand in for someone else, don't leave here today without getting prayed for. They are amazing. They've got new things coming up. So again, they are available in the back corner always.
Don't forget your kids. We love them, but we want you to take them home.
Yes, and one way immediately after service today, as we're having our life group fair, we do need to get the palace back into shape. So we need people in here sweeping up, trash cleaned out. So meet us in the back corner in the utility closet, and we'll get you set up there. And we're going to have one last song.
Yeah, guys. Have a great week, you guys.
Yes,
This is from
thank
Forward
you.
Point.
I see is the battle, you see my victory. What I see is the mountain, you see the mountain move. As I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. Let me hear you, church. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Let me hear it. Every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Yeah! If you are for me, and if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. Nothing. When I see the ashes, you see the beauty. When I see his cross scar, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Sing it again. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. Oh, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Sing it again. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet. Oh, I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.